Good evening, everybody, and welcome everyone to what has fast become one of my most favorite evenings of the year as the CEO of the Jewish Education Project. Tonight, I am so pleased to be inviting all of you to join us in celebrating the achievements of our Robert M. Sherman Young Pioneer Award winners. We'll have a chance to meet all of them shortly, but really to welcome DiCo DiColandrea, Melissa Hume, Dammara Kovnats Hall, Pamela Schuller, and Avi Siegel, who you'll all get a chance to meet in the next few moments. And I'm really glad that all of you have joined us here this evening. We're calling tonight a fireside chat. The only thing missing, of course, is the fireside, but we might deal with that a bit later on in the evening when we talk about what's really hot in Jewish education today. At the Jewish Education Project, we enjoy being able to celebrate those great educators out there who are doing such wonderful things to ensure that all Jewish youth and their families have a chance to thrive in today's world. And today's Young Pioneer Award winners really exemplify all that is great in Jewish education today. We do have a few formal things to get on with tonight, including thanking all of those people that have made tonight possible, especially our core partner, UJA Federation of New York, who stands with us through these challenging times and beyond as one of the great supporters of Jewish education. I also want to make sure that everybody here tonight celebrating these award winners also knows about the benefit for the Jewish Education Project, which is taking place on March 22nd at 7:30 p.m. You can visit that website and register right now, benefit.jewisheducationproject.org. You heard it here, benefit.jewishedproject.org. And you can also log on to register, and while you're doing so, you can also pay tribute to a Jewish educator who has made a difference in your life. This year, we decided that what we are going to do at our benefit is honor all of the Jewish educators that have made a difference in this world. And if you feel like treating yourself to something really special, you should log on and go to the tribute wall. And I did that this evening before coming on tonight and had a look at some of the wonderful testimonies to some of the great Jewish educators out there. And one other important, exciting announcement tonight. We are also really privileged and pleased to be able to announce the launch of our matching gift campaign. Through the generosity of the Martine and Stanley Matching Gift Fund, all of the gifts that you make to the Jewish Education Project will be doubled through March 22nd. So I encourage all of you to log on to benefit.jewishedproject.org, sign up for our benefit in a couple of weeks' time, and really join us in this huge celebration. Tonight's event, you're able to also sign in and send us some questions. We'll do our best to try and answer them. But without further ado, I want to turn over and introduce the real stars of tonight's presentation, the people that will be joining me in tonight's chat, the 5 winners of the Robert M. Sherman Young Pioneer Awards. I am very pleased to be able to announce and congratulate the 5 of them. KM DiCo, who is the Associate Director of Yachad, Congregation Beth Elohim's K-12 Jewish and Hebrew program, and in his free time, he runs the Brooklyn Debate League. Melissa Hume, who is the Assistant Director of the Stephen Wise Free Synagogue Early Childhood Center. Dammara Kovnats Hall, who works full-time as a Jewish Studies teacher at Rodef Shalom School. Additionally, she's a student at the Institute of Culinary Education and the founder of Jewish Cocktails. Pamela Schuller is the founding director of Here Now, a program Jewish board, and also an internationally known disability and mental health advocate and professional stand-up comedian. Tonight is surely going to be filled with a few laughs and maybe a few drinks later on as well. And last but not least is Avi Siegel, who is the director of the Waxman High School and Youth Engagement at Temple Israel of Great Neck. We are so thrilled to be able to be here tonight with you and really just to celebrate all that you've achieved and all that you're going to achieve tonight. But I want to start off by talking to all of you and having a conversation. And I'll call on each of you to ask some questions and we'll go around and we'll have a good chance to chat. Wow. Tonight actually marks, for many people, 1 year since COVID-19 changed our world forever. I want to just ask all of you just to start off by telling the audience today, what were those first days like for you when you first heard about this? What was going through your mind and how did you jump into action when you heard about this news? DiCo, let's hand it over to you to get us going.
Thank you so much. First, I just want to say a brief word of thanks to Tehila Eisenstein-Feil, my supervisor at Congregation Beth Elohim, and all the folks who have been so supportive on my Jewish journey for the last 6 years that I've been Jewish. So to talk about a year ago today, wow. Well, I spent a lot of it sitting in this chair, looking at this computer, trying to figure out how was I going to teach kids using this device. And for me, like in those first couple weeks, it was really scary because it was bringing back memories of September 11th, 20 years ago. As a native New Yorker who was there for that, like obviously the connection was there. But one of the things that I did to cope with it really early on was to find a way to connect to my students over the computer, where I was recording or writing and then recording Hamilton parodies for them, just trying to like give messages of hope in a time that felt really dire.
All right, maybe we'll come back to the role that music has played in some other people's educational journeys as well, because it is the arts have really been a common theme through many of your work. Melissa, how about you? When you first heard about COVID, what was going through your mind as a Jewish educator, especially for early childhood age?
Yeah, I think in the first few weeks, it was really disbelief of the situation we were in. I think we all thought we were going to be home for a few weeks and then we would be back. And I remember the moment when it hit that this was our reality for the foreseeable future. And it was this immediate call to action of we need to figure out how to be there for these children so they don't think we just disappeared from their lives. And so, the next few months were just a blur of trying to figure out how we could support those children, let them know we were still here, we were still part of their lives, we were okay, helping our staff, to sort of get their bearings and helping with the tech and for the parents as well. So whether it was an 8 a.m. story time or an 8 p.m. cocktail for parents to just sort of vent, I think so much of our energy just turned to how can we support each other. And so that's, I think, my impression of those early days of the pandemic.
You're already raising some really important points that we're going to come back to during the conversation this evening. And one of the things you hit on almost straight off the bat was that many of us are charged with educating our youth, and the pandemic forced us to realize really quickly that we're actually educating the entire family. And what does that actually mean? And I think we'll talk about that part of the conversation as well. So, Dammara, can you take yourself back to that time when you first heard about it?
Sure. Like for everyone, it was very frightening and overwhelming, and showing up for my students is what kept me grounded in what I needed to do day to day. Myself and my colleagues really took it one day at a time, just kept showing up and doing our best. We learned a lot of new skills. I started off with recording myself and submitting videos, and the thought of going live in Zoom felt terrifying, but there was a lot of pivoting. I think that just was the theme and continues to be the theme of COVID.
Thanks, Dammara. Pamela, what about you?
First of all, thank you so much for having me. So Here Now has like always been in part an online platform with online components, an online program. So when this happened, I think we were uniquely qualified to quickly shift and support teens in a virtual platform. So a lot of what I did early on was listen to teens, listen to what they needed. That changed early on what felt like hour to hour, day to day, week to week. So it was a lot of listening and empowering them and validating, right? Like there was a lot of, you're right, it sucks that this was canceled. It stinks that you have no idea if you're going back to school. So a lot of validating and listening and then trying to craft things with their voices in mind to provide support and the pieces that they needed.
I'm going to come back to that as well during the course of the conversation. This whole piece about listening to people where they're at. Now, this doesn't sound so radical for many of us, but when you think about a traditional role of a teacher, right, the teacher's the one doing all the talking and doing all the teaching. And then all of a sudden we saw pretty quickly that the teacher's role in many cases was inverted in some ways. And I want to talk a bit about that with you as we go through today as well. Avi, can you take yourself back to that time?
Thanks, David. So not to echo too much of what my colleague said, but a lot of that was going on in our sphere where the teens, they didn't know what school looked like anymore. They didn't know what it looked like to have friends that they can't see anymore. And so one of the biggest shifts I remember is I thought to myself, what is it going to look like to have them connect again? And that idea of bridging where they physically are with being part of the community became this new focus of my entire force.
Let's talk about this connection piece, because I think it's just worth reflecting on. I'm going to ask some of you about it now, because I think the relationship that educators now have with technology is perhaps different to what it was pre-pandemic. So before the pandemic, many people viewed technology as a distraction or something that got in the way of education in some cases. And something pretty dramatic has changed in the last 12 months about that. So I'd love to hear about connection and technology and the way you've been able to utilize and benefit from this in your experience. So Dammara, we'll start with you.
Sure. I think not feeling super comfortable with technology aside from, Word and PowerPoint, so many different options, which I'm so grateful for, were kind of just thrust upon the community. Like, have you heard of this program? And you can also use this. And the learning curve of trying to keep up with what program will work for what age group was very demanding. I like to start off all my classes with a mindful moment and taking a moment to just check in. And I still do that today. And we have this moment of silence and we listen to Tibetan singing bowls and we kind of just breathe and say, how are you doing right now in this moment? And also being able to bring in technology with that, to bring in students who are either in the classroom with us or at home, to kind of bridge those two worlds together has been very powerful. And my students share with me that often this is the highlight of the day. They can just be themselves. They can just take a breath. They're like, we love Mindful Minute. So that's something that's sticking with me right now.
So I'm not going to do a mindful minute with everybody, but maybe everybody on this call and everyone out there tonight can just take a deep breath and appreciate what it's like to be amongst these 5 wonderful Jewish educators, and really just take a moment to look about what these people actually represent for all of us who are so ingrained in this work. But to have you being celebrated tonight, that's a mindful minute in itself. Pamela, your program is an app. In some ways, the app, the technology was your communication. So talk to us about what that actually looked like.
So we have a lot. We've got in-person stuff during not COVID, kind of all kinds of outside of the box innovative programs on mental health, wellness, resilience, not just mental illness. And so we wanted to meet teens where they are, which is why they've been asking for an app for a while. We had started designing it early on in COVID. I had a team of 10 teens working with me on it. And then COVID hit, and I think I accepted close to 100 teens to help work on the app. Everything from color design to content to, how they were going to interact with it. So we had over 100 teens in the end who got to help us design the app. And it's just such a cool space. It's not social media. It's a space where teens can find out they're not alone, ask questions, connect, learn about what they're going through. And it's an incredible resource. And I've loved that it's now that it's live and we have 500 teens on it, we're seeing it used differently than what we expected, but they're using it all of the time. And I love kind of watching it come to life. And I'm going to be honest, I love technology. I'm learning constantly. But there are so many things I don't know. I don't know. TikTok was totally new to me, but I work with teens. So I just called teens and I was like, you want to teach me how to TikTok? And they put together a class for me and my teen leaders taught me TikTok. So what I don't understand, I lean into the fact that my teens probably do. And it's okay to say, we all shift positions. Sometimes I'm a student and I'd love to learn from you what you're great at.
I think what you're getting at here is fascinating, because I think there are lots of words and terms which have become emblematic of the pandemic, and in the first wave of it, socially distanced became everyone was socially distanced, right? And in a strange way, socially distanced, but we were actually more connected to one another in some weird way than ever before. DiCo, what are your thoughts about this connection piece?
Yeah, so one of the ways that connection happened for me was with my work at the Brooklyn Debate League, which then meant that it was able to overlap with my work as a Jewish educator in ways that it hadn't before. Brooklyn Debate League had only ever before the pandemic hosted tournaments in person, at schools. And there were all these barriers to access. Like you have to like get yourself to the physical school. But suddenly when we threw it online, then I could open up to all the students in my life. And I have had an abundance of kids from CBE now join the Brooklyn Debate League. And it's been really beautiful to see kids from, even outside of New York, like zooming in and participating in this opportunity that just wouldn't exist for them had it not been moved online.
I don't want to be ageist here at all in this question, but Avi, I'll ask you, like, do you think your age like had an advantage, like in terms of education? Like some of this technology was so like just so natural for all of you in some ways. Like you grew up with it. Did you find yourself teaching other teachers in your environments that weren't as familiar with it? How did that play itself out, Avi?
So we have a running joke in my office that after the pandemic hit, I was the first to get a PhD in Zoom from all of my fantastic and amazing colleagues. That yeah, there was a little bit of an ease for our generation to jump into the technology that felt more familiar than others that we worked with. However, I think we leveraged that, right? So I know personally on my end, I stepped in so many different aspects for the larger synagogue community that I didn't get to before, knowing that, hey, I'm going to put the host Zoom for the minyan in order to welcome people necessarily until the rest of my population felt comfortable. So I will say that there definitely was an advantage, but if anything, it brought me closer to more of the community that I didn't get to spend time with before.
Interesting. Melissa, I've left you for last on this question because I think the early childhood age is really fascinating in terms of some of the shifts which have taken place with technology. We had this running debate in our office about, pre-pandemic, should early childhood ages be exposed to technology? Should we be doing our best to keep them apart from technology? And then all of a sudden you had no choice. So I'm wondering sort of like if you could try and explain to the audience, like what was going on and what was the transition like for you and the kids and your families as you had to confront this now not for the first time, but like the choice was taken away for you in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, it was very pronounced, to put it mildly. I think in early childhood for many years, tech is something of a four-letter word. I mean, screen time and the idea of when it's appropriate for children's development for them to have access to these sorts of things, it's a big topic of conversation. And overnight, it became our lifeline. And so, for many of us in the field, for my school in particular, we really tried to take this tact of let's look at this as a tool, as the way we would look at clay or markers or wire or anything else we were going to offer to a child. Let's do this intentionally and thoughtfully and get ourselves to a point where we understand it enough that it's just about the connection. And so in all of our work, we always try to come back to this concept of how can we forget that we're on a computer and just be together. And so I think that was really at the heart of a lot of the work. But, it took a lot of struggle and a lot of internal feelings for so many early childhood educators who for so long had resisted this. But, I think we've come to see that, the value of the connections and our ability to maintain them far outweighed, sort of our old impressions of the limitations of, how we had perceived this, this tool.
It's fascinating what you're saying. So let's just point out in terms of if we're teaching the audience tonight and ongoing about technology, like number one, like you can't just take your regular classroom face to face and then just put it online. Like, surprise, it doesn't work like that. And number two, and I think this is really important, Melissa, that you remind everyone of, at its very, very best, technology is still only a tool. And that it's only worth using if it helps you to efficiently and effectively achieve your educational objectives. Don't just think as you're going to turn on a screen, all of a sudden these kids are going to say, wow, this is the most exciting and most meaningful thing I've ever experienced. And I think your lesson there is really important for all of us. Anyone else want to comment on the pitfalls or the pros of technology while we're here?
I'd love to chime in.
Yeah,
I think it's also enabled me to get to know my students in a different way, especially with the Zoom chat feature and being able to chat to the host privately. I have learned so many wonderful and personal things about my students that I don't think they would want to necessarily share with the whole class. Sometimes just the fact that they've learned, a new sonatina in piano, they're sharing with me because they're proud of themselves and they're excited. but they wouldn't normally share in front of the entire community. And I'm able to have multiple conversations at the same time where they feel more comfortable. And that's been very special.
Interesting. Yeah, Pam.
I feel like I talk to teens a lot about the fact that technology can be really good and really harmful. And so how do we check in with ourselves on what's feeling good, what's feeling like it's filling me, what are the good pieces, and what are the things that maybe we're on too much of? So it's okay to say Instagram is bumming me out. And so like maybe for a few days we aren't on Instagram, but I'm lonely and I'm loving Zoom, so maybe we lean into that. And so we don't have to kind of say yes to technology. We can pick and choose the pieces that are allowing us to be our best selves, making us feel mentally healthy and safe, and kind of going from there.
Great. Avi, yeah. Do you want to chime in here?
So, Pam, that's so perfectly apt. And I just want to add to it that what's been amazing about the technology is normally in our educational framework, we invite the learner in. Right? It's our space. It welcomes them into a feeling of safety, security, learning, and growth. And for the first time, what technology provided is they let us in, right? Us as educators were brought into our teens' world. And we had projects where they took us on scavenger hunts around their own home, where they showed the candles that they would light on Shabbat that I never would see before. And finally, technology let them welcome me into their life as an equal partner. And that was radical.
Okay, but now you've got extra people in your classroom, right? Because now the parents are also like lurking over the kids, trying to find out, well, what's happening in this school and what's happening in this educational experience. And by the way, I've also seen now more grandparents joining in celebrations and joining in family life as well, and the educational experience. I know, DiCo, do you have anything to add here about what it's like having the parents now in your classroom, or at least, next door in your classroom?
Yeah, I want to tell a funny story how we were playing Kahoot, which, by the way, who knew? That's like the saving grace for this generation. It's Kahoot. If you're wondering how to make your kids happy, play Kahoot, it turns out. So we were playing a Kahoot on like Torah figures or characters or stories, and there was like a person whose name I didn't recognize in the game, and usually the kids just kind of put in silly names, so I didn't think anything of it. But at the end of the game, it turns out it was one of the kids' moms and one of the kids' older teen sisters who was just like, for fun, competing against the seventh grader. And the seventh grader totally beat them, by the way. But it was this like cool moment of like the entire family can get involved in the activities that we're doing in a way that just would not be possible if we were in our classrooms, like our regular classrooms.
Okay, I don't want to completely go off script here, but this is like the Young Pioneer Award winners. DiCo, can you just show everybody the pen you just used? What's the pen in your hand? Like, isn't that one of the most retro? That is one of the most retro pens I have seen. I haven't seen one of those pens in a long time.
I'm a debate coach. We've already talked about this. Of course, I have this pen in my hand. I need to write different colors.
All right, DiCo, let's pick it up because you mentioned here, which I think is really interesting and might surprise some of our listeners here this evening. When you were offering a whole lot of different courses and activities and programs, something rose to the top as the most favorite course for these kids to choose. And it might surprise people that it was the Torah study elective became the most prominent and most popular course for your kids. Can you explain to us, like, why or how or what was taking place that made Torah study the most popular elective for your students?
Yeah, I can. And first of all, let me just say that the idea of having electives and having choice has been just paramount in this whole situation. Like, especially for older kids, our entire curriculum has been based on having choice, which is just fundamental to make the Zoom world more, doable. But specifically, like how the Torah choice became so popular is because it's not just looking at Torah as a book that's 5,000 years old. It's looking at Torah as a moral code for dealing with moral injustice. If the children are taking away nothing else from this year and from last year, it is that our country suffers from multiple pandemics. And we're talking about the pandemic of COVID. We're talking about the pandemic of racism. We're talking about the pandemic of inequality. We're talking about the pandemic of injustice. And when you frame it for kids in that way, that's like, actually, this thing that you thought was boring, that like we talk about on Saturdays, that like you tone out, like zone out for that part of like services, that's actually like all about how are we supposed to navigate an unjust world. And when you frame it like that, and when we make our lessons like that, the kids they're here for it, and they're excited about it, and they want to be engaged in this conversation, and they're also grateful to learn that in fact being Jewish is part and parcel of pursuing justice. That these are not two separate things. That this is what it means to be in Hebrew school. It means to be learning how to be more just.
DiCo, how old are these kids that you're talking about?
So specifically, I'm talking about 7th, 8th, and 9th graders.
Wow. I mean, I think it's a good reminder to everybody that it's that education that can be taught to any age group in different ways. And I want to come back to this issue, but let's pick up on it now while you've raised the multiple pandemics going on in America during the last year, or the multiple issues. It certainly wasn't just a year where we were focusing just on issues of the pandemic. There were issues of race and civil unrest and a whole lot of other things that we were dealing with. Does anybody want to chime in here about how they were dealing with some of those broader societal issues in their work beyond the pandemic, so to speak? I'm going to ask someone first. Avi, let's come in first, Avi.
So it took over. Like, I don't know how else to say it. We spent 6 times the amount we normally would on talking about racial justice. It took over our lives. And I think the reason I even leaned into it more so than I would have is because it was raw and it was real. That's what the pandemic did. It stripped away a lot of the assumptions we used to have about what we should be teaching, right? No longer is that I needed to fill the X box of Tanakh, the Y box of Musar, right? I said to myself, what are my kids feeling? What are they wrestling with? And what am I doing to help them figure that out? And so we said, in addition to mental health work that Pam has highlighted, which has been so crucial this time, I asked myself, educationally, what should we be focusing on? So we brought out social justice, we brought out racial inequality, and we talked about it because it was real in their lives.
Dammara, I see you nodding. Do you want to come in here as well?
Absolutely. I think, it's inspiring to hear all of my colleagues here and all of the work that they did and all the flexibility. And I think not just with higher age groups, I think also I teach 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade, and they have the same approach. They want to know what's going on. They know that something's going on. They're just not understanding all the time how to process this and how to work through it. But they are aware that something or many things are going on in the world. And I try to make my classes convey that part of Judaism is our commitment and our obligation to tikkun olam, and also to hospitality, welcoming the stranger, and how important it is for all of us to see beyond our own bubbles and to really ensure that we are practicing chesed, kindness, and creating safe and welcoming and inclusive spaces for all. And I'm really deeply moved and encouraged to see my students enthusiastic about social justice issues. I support students in exploring their own experience of being part of a diverse international Jewish community and what that is like for them in their own experiences. And I mean, we look at a range of Jews, not just thinking about Jews who don't look like us because of various racial backgrounds, but also different denominations, such as the ultra-Orthodox Jews of Brooklyn. So really just focusing on how we are all connected, and they really thrive with this.
Great. Melissa, is it ever too young to be exposing children to some of these types of issues, and how do you deal with them in your environments that you're working in?
Yeah, no, I don't think so, especially in New York City. I mean, these are children that are walking down the street in an incredibly diverse community, and they're seeing, they're seeing people on the street, and they have questions and they notice. And, one of the things that, we've historically been able to do at our school is we have a men's shelter in our building. And so for many years, we've taken even the youngest children there and, written letters and drawn pictures and, done projects that were related to raising funds and having this connection and this idea that, you're never too small to have an impact. And, it's respecting them as, citizens of the world, not just future citizens, but they're citizens of the world right now. And so I think it's honoring their experience to start to engage them and to start to help them see that, there are things that they can do and actions that they can take that are meaningful and that will, better the world around them.
And Pamela, what about the teenagers? I mean, they literally want to change the world. So how do you contain their enthusiasm and funnel it in a positive way all the time?
Yeah, so my background, I'm so sorry, it's so noisy outside of my window right now, New York City. So my background is in inclusion, and I think we're really, here now is really a community for our kids who are heavily involved of like, your identities matter. Like, whatever you bring to this community matters. And that's a big piece for us. And first of all, this year was tough. This was good on every level, a tough year. And it felt like there were weeks where, some of it was a push and pull. Like, our kids wanted to go protest, but their parents were like, but there's a global pandemic. So how do we support them in having a voice and making the change and keeping them safe physically and mental, like all of those pieces? And it felt like, and it's hard to say that, it felt like a lot of push and pull of like, your parent or guardian is saying you can't go into a giant group of people, but let's come up with 5 things you can do. So it felt like a lot of that, if I'm going to be honest.
Okay. No, I totally hear that. Dammara, you mentioned something about your students' connection to other Jews, and I know you've thought a lot about concepts related to Jewish peoplehood and the global Jewish people. Are you able to say a couple of things about why that's important to you, why it's important to your students in today's discussion?
Absolutely. My students have so many burning questions. They want to know, how am I connected to Israel? How am I connected to other Jews? They say, I go to Brooklyn sometimes and I know they're Jewish and I don't understand, what they are, who they are, and what traditions they have. Like, how are they connected to me? And we spend a lot of time in class trying to unpack what our own histories are and our own lineage and kind of figure out what is our place within the Jewish community. Is it just Jews in America and then there's some Jews in Israel? Or is this kind of broader diaspora community that I can connect with? What does it mean to be Jewish and how do I connect?
I mean, it's really interesting because I think today's generation of young people often have reputations of being insular and focused on themselves and only that which they know. And I think a few of you today have mentioned in various ways that it's actually not what's happening. That these young people are actually very interested and intrigued by the other, whomever that might be, and learning from that, partly to learn about themselves. Like, a lot of people can learn more about themselves by exploring the other. But there is also this empathy amongst today's generation, which I think we underestimate sometimes, and maybe give this generation of young people a bit of a bad rap sometimes. DiCo, I see you nodding there. Did you want to come in there?
Oh, yeah. I mean, when I'm feeling sad about the state of the world, I talk to a teenager. Like, that's just point blank where I'm getting my inspiration right now. It's from kids in middle school. It's from kids in high school. It's amazing how the kids are being so resilient right now. I cannot imagine what it is like to be a middle schooler or a high schooler or any child, frankly, right now. It's hard enough as an adult. I cannot imagine doing this as a child. And yet, not only are they showing this tremendous resilience, but it is just opening up these floodgates of empathy and inspiration to do something, right? To make the world better than they found it. And I mean, they were already great before the pandemic. Don't get me wrong. Kids are great. But like, this has really opened up a whole new level of kids understanding just what is happening around them and what has to be done. And they are eager to do something about it, which gives me a lot of hope and inspiration.
I don't want to dwell on it too much, and I was actually about to go forward looking right now, but I think, DiCo, you've really raised an important point. Like, we've had a year where kids have had different types of b'nai mitzvahs, like not the ones that they had planned for. Kids missed out on their proms and their graduation ceremonies, their coming of age ceremonies between different transitions in life. Summer camps didn't happen for many kids last year. Travel to Israel didn't happen. There's a sense of loss out there, I think, in some ways that I think we as educators were on the front line of dealing with that loss. But I'm also interested in looking forward, and we're at this really strange point in time of the pandemic when there's still a lot of illness and there are still people contracting COVID every day, and yet increasingly more and more people are being vaccinated. I think it's safe to say 1 year out that there's light at the end of the tunnel. I'd love to hear about how you're thinking about, as a Jewish educator, looking into the summer, looking beyond what you see. So Avi, maybe you can talk a bit about the transition you're going to see from the school year into the summer? I know it's a long way away, but how you're seeing your trajectory with your students going in that path?
Absolutely. So whereas a year ago for summer, right, our idea was how can we help our teens in our community, right? So the ones that aren't going to the camps, the ones that don't necessarily have a place outside their home that they can inhabit. And this year, I think it's helping teens actually find outlets again, right? I really see my work jumping in the spring to say, you know what, let's figure out what can we do to reach the Jewish potential of a summer that we've always wanted, right? And luckily looking around at all the support in the educational world about programs that are saying we're going to open our doors, we're going to welcome people back in safely, right? I think that a lot of parents and teens, they don't know about it necessarily. Right? They assume that the world is still just as shut off today that it will be 3 months from now. And I think that we're going to start being liaisons to the bigger Jewish world at a higher percentage with our teens than we have before.
Really, really interesting. What about your own behaviors or your own practices as educators? What do you think is going to change? I like to call them COVID keepers. The things that we're going to keep beyond COVID. Is there anything that you've done this year which you never thought you would have done the first time around, but now actually, you know what, this actually worked. It's got a lifetime beyond the pandemic. Pam, have you picked up on anything?
Yeah, a lot of things. And you're right, by the way, that the last year has been so much loss for young people, like both real loss and ambiguous loss of, school events and things they were looking forward to in summer camp. And I've always kind of lived this yes and lifestyle where like yes is what is and the and is how we shape the next steps. It's kind of my favorite motto. It's from improv and stand-up that I've moved into my whole life. So I think there's one thing I've learned this year, it's that I have no idea what a few months from now is going to look like. I can guess and we don't know. I see people getting vaccinated and not totally sure what this summer is going to look like. So I think that really pulling yes and the teens talk about it now of like, yes, this is where we are. And how do we keep building great things around wherever we are in this moment? It doesn't mean there isn't loss happening, but how do we use whatever is happening as the yes and build on it?
Great. Melissa, what's something that you've learned this year that you're going to carry forward with you?
I think in general, it's less of a specific thing and more of an overall sort of zeitgeist of, never doubt what you're capable of when you have no choice. I think it was really a trial by fire for us of, let's look at all these things that we thought were off the table and let's take another look and let's see how we can make this work in our favor. And so, I feel like I'm going to carry that with me going forward as an educator for the rest of my life. And I think, our families and the children that, went through this process with us at our school and just throughout the larger community, I think have really, have this opportunity to look with fresh eyes at what's possible.
Great. Dammara, what about you moving forward beyond COVID?
I think to echo some of the themes that we've already heard, but being able to pivot, being able to say, you know what, plan B is great. It's not all about plan A, and we don't have to shoot for that as the goal and the expectation, but we are capable of pivoting and it can be great and we can learn through the growth and the challenges. I think the way that community has come together, I'm closer with my colleagues than ever before. I'm closer with my students than ever before because they've seen me when I felt challenged and overwhelmed, and I've seen them when they felt challenged and overwhelmed. And there is something very beautiful and equalizing about that of saying, I see who you are. You are my teacher, but you're also not perfect. And that actually makes me feel more comfortable and safe with you. So I think being able to show vulnerability and to be able to pivot is something that I want to continue in my work with my students.
Wow. Thank you. DiCo.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. And for me, that brings up like a running joke that we have at my school, which is that we call our religious ed program the feelings department because, we're just all about the feelings. And particularly in the pandemic, like, wow, we are like leaning heavy into that. There's like mood meters. There's like, it's a lot of SCSL. And it's like it should have been like that the whole time. And after COVID, I hope that years after this is well behind us, it's still like that because SESL and mood meters and the feelings department belong in classrooms. Our children need us to be there for them, not just to teach them some content that's already been prescribed, but to be there for them, like physically and emotionally there for them, particularly as they're going to be navigating who knows what in the coming years. Even if, this pandemic ends, it's not like suddenly everything is hunky-dory and the world is great. Like, no, like the world is not great. The world is a scary, unjust place where there's hard work to do, and kids are going to have to keep feeling those feelings, and we have to continue being for them being there for them as their teachers and to help them process that.
And for our listeners, SCSL is?
So socio-emotional spiritual learning is the SESL acronym I was talking about.
All right. It's great to know. You've raised a really important point here. And I've had throughout the pandemic, I've had this podcast called Adapting, where I talk to a whole lot of great people in Jewish education sharing their thoughts. And probably the simplest and the toughest question I ask each of those people that have come on is, what do you think is the purpose of Jewish education? And it's fascinating because that question, which seems so simple, is one where I don't know if we spend enough time actually thinking about it. DiCo, you just gave us a pretty strong understanding of what you think the purpose of Jewish education is, without putting anyone on the spot with a tough question. Anyone want to chime in? Now you're nodding there, Melissa, so I'm going to ask you, how would you describe the purpose of Jewish education, maybe specifically for early childhood kids, but not necessarily?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, DiCo is very much speaking my language. I mean, that's all of early childhood is really based on this idea of how do we learn to be people in the world? And Judaism offers such a beautiful framework for children and their families to explore all of these concepts, and how do we relate to each other, and what are our responsibilities to each other. And again, I think that's built into how we teach in early childhood. And I agree with you fully. I would love to see it continue, because I think that no learning can happen for a child who doesn't feel good about themselves, or is struggling to make sense of the world and doesn't have an outlet for that. And, I just want to quickly share one of my favorite moments from, these COVID calls that we had when we were all remote, because I think it speaks to that one of my favorite calls was one-on-one with a child who was 2.5. And I asked her, what was something she missed about school? What was something she really loved when we were in school together? And she talked about our kitchen area in our classroom. And I had all this great documentation from, photos and things. And I pulled up a photo of our kitchen area that she could look at. And she asked her grown-up to move the camera into the spot in her home where they had a little kitchen area set up for her to play. And we compared them, and we thought about what was the same and what was different. And, we talked about things that she had made for us in the kitchen. And, she started to make it again. And it didn't matter that we were on this screen. It mattered that, we remembered, and we had this shared memory and this shared history. And again, that's another beautiful piece of Judaism, that as a people, there's this shared history and memory. So that to me is sort of all at the heart of, all the work that we start doing with them when they're small, and that you all continue to do with them as they grow.
Thank you. That's wonderful. One of my favorite questions to ask people like yourselves while we're honoring you is, are you able to also take a moment to honor an educator in your life who's made a real difference to you? And I'm going to quickly go around the squares and ask each of you, I think actually, if you feel comfortable, name the educator, name what they taught you. Let's keep it brief, but I think let's pay tribute to those wonderful people in our lives that made such an indelible impression on all of us. So, Avi, you can start off.
So I'm going to take it a different direction. Whereas there are tons of mentors and sponsors and incredible educators that have influenced me and grown. I'm going to do a yes and from my Pam's playbook, if you will, and just say that right now I have 2 toddlers, and raising 2 toddlers in a pandemic, as anyone can imagine, is wonderful and fantastic and exhausting. And they have 2 incredible teachers. So at their school, Allie and Raina are 2 incredible educators that spend every single day with my children, bringing them light, bringing them warmth, bringing them all the feels that they feel, the good and the bad. And it not only lets me do my work, but it lets me know that they're truly being seen, heard by somebody that cares and somebody that's doing an incredible job.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right, Pamela, you want to honor an educator in your life?
Sure, I have tons. So I got shipped away to like difficult kid boarding school when I was in high school. And I had an English teacher, Sarah Beck, who I think taught me to like love creativity, showed me that I had a voice even in high school, amplified my voice, helped me learn to love. She was the one that got me into stand up. And I think the biggest thing she taught me was that you can hold struggle and loving yourself at the same time. And that's something that I continue passing on and thinking about every day.
Great. Dammara, let's honor an educator in your life as well.
It's so hard because I feel like there's just so many touch points, and I always want to go back to the childhood memories, but I'm going to push and I think challenge myself to speak about a time that was really challenging for me, which was when I spent 2 years in Israel at Pardes, and just wanting to name Aviva Laura Goldbert. She's the director of the Pardes Educators Program, and really taking the time to make sure that I was able to ask every single question that I wanted to. I had so many burning questions. It was the first time that I had studied Gemara and Mishnah in depth, and I had burning questions. I could not wait another day. I needed to know at 8 o'clock at night, and she was always available and continues to be available. And I just think not just to me, but to all of her students, I'm just treasuring the support of her.
Wow. It's already just so wonderful, like that you can see how your educators have shaped who you all are as well, and you can really feel and see that coming through in even the stories that you're telling. But DiCo, who would you like to pay tribute to?
So I would want to honor my speech and debate coach in high school, Julie Scheinman. As I mentioned earlier, one of the things I'm most worried about with our kids is how they are coping and trying to be resilient in these really trying times. And for me, when I was in high school, I went to school 3 blocks away from the Twin Towers, and it was a really trying time. And Miss Scheinman, or as she insists I call her now, Julie, was one of the only teachers that made space for us to process what had happened. And she made that both personally and systemically, because as my debate coach, speech and debate was the place where I found what I needed to talk about what had happened and to really find my voice.
I don't mean to ask specifically, but I think the question is pertinent. DiCo, how old were you in 9/11?
I was 16.
Okay. It's interesting how these world events are shaping all of our lives and how we present in the world today. And recently, a colleague and I were discussing, for many of our children, they will look back and they will say, where were they when they first heard about the pandemic? And where were they when they realized the pandemic was making this indelible impression on their lives? When you're actually living in history, like, it's sort of like hard to contextualize that, but I think it's a really interesting and important reference point you're making there, DiCo. Melissa, can we honor an educator in your life as well?
Yes, I'm gonna make it super short so I can thank a few quickly because I just couldn't pick. I want to thank Lori, who's yes, this is my Oscar speech exactly. I want to thank Lori, who was the director who first brought me into the school and community, and Edith, the teacher who I was a student teacher with, and I think without her I probably would not have become a teacher at the end of the day. So I'm very grateful to her. I also want to thank my wonderful director, Miriam Kalmer, who, partnered with me and really gave me rein to explore and innovate and, say, we're going to do all these crazy Zoom calls and it'll be great. And the teachers that I worked with most closely last year, Rosemary and Adriana, who after every single call sat with me for twice the length of the call to think about what worked and what didn't. And I don't think I would have been here without any of those people all together as a lovely, lovely team.
Thank you all so much. I spoke at the beginning of the show that we were going to, we're having our tribute as the agency, the Jewish Education Project, on March 22nd, where we're honoring Jewish educators as heroes. When I use that term, I don't use it lightly, but I do remember the 7 o'clock clap when we all used to go out there and applaud all of the first responders at the beginning and throughout the summer of the pandemic. And we felt now was a really appropriate time for us to actually honor the educators who were the heroes and the backbone of so much of society during this time, and the Jewish educators and all of you and all that you represent, often putting your own well-being secondary to those of your students, which I wouldn't necessarily encourage, but it is a definition of a hero. And I think you've all exemplified tonight that honoring you as our Robert M. Sherman Young Pioneer Award winners is not just a way for us to be able to honor all of you and the fantastic work that you've been doing, but is really just a great setup for us to be able to honor all of the Jewish educators out there who have really done heroic work always, but especially and intensified in the last year. We're coming to the end of our time together, and I want to give all of you a chance to leave us all with your zinger. What's the thing you want the world to know about you and your blessing or your promise or your hope for Jewish education out there? Here's your chance to really let us all know what's on your mind, what's the deep message you want to share with the entire audience. I'll try and go in reverse order if I remember the way we went before. So, Melissa, you're up first. What's your message?
I think that at the end of the day, the most important thing is to remain connected. And whether it's in the same room or whether it's over a computer screen, I think as long as we remain available to each other as a community, then even something like a pandemic can't stop that.
Wow. DiCo.
So since I converted to Judaism, I didn't have the benefit of going to Jewish schools as a kid. But my partner tells me that all they learned there was sheket. My message is there's so much more to Jewish education than sheket. And I hope that all educators everywhere are able to bring the passion and energy and love into the classrooms so that all kids understand the richness and beauty that's really in our tradition.
Wow. I'm never going to say sheket again in a classroom after that one. All right, Dammara.
I'd say that we can all be encouraged with the multitude of creative ways that we've all come together to support one another during this time. And it's heartwarming and inspiring to experience this sense of connection and mutual aid that exists in our community. And I'm just so excited to see my students embrace learning about Judaism and connecting with their heritage, and they give me great hope for the future.
Wow. Avi, what's your message for everybody?
I bring light. I think that we are all in this to help bring positivity, to help let Judaism raise us out of darkness, out of sorrow, out of strife. Passover is just around the corner. And I was talking to my teens tonight about the fact that we hear this story from thousands of years ago, but we also live our own stories of narrow straits. And I think we're the people that hopefully are going to be that support system when they want to raise up and be their best.
Pam.
Let's all lean into experiential education, think outside of the box so that we can give every single young person the tools to build resilience. We know that can be built. Which I want every single young person to know and feel that they add something important to this world and to this Jewish community.
Wow. Maybe I'm not supposed to get emotional, but hearing all of you tonight, it's inspiring. I mean, it's legitimately inspiring and emotional to hear all of you, and to be able to celebrate all of you tonight is a real privilege for me and a real privilege for all of us at the Jewish Education Project to be able to do so. So I want to really just thank you all, DiCo, Melissa, Dammara, Pamela, and Avi, for being who you are, for being the educators you're meant to be, and for filling us all with such optimism, hope, and just carry on the work that you're doing. The future is really bright because of people like you. And I know this is a Zoom celebration. I do look forward to the time when we can celebrate together in person. We might even ask Dammara to mix us a few cocktails and have a l'chaim in person together. But really, it's really just a real privilege to be able to celebrate all of you. So on behalf of everybody that's listening tonight, I want to really congratulate all of you. You do tremendous honor to the namesake of this award, the Robert M. Sherman Young Pioneer Award. I know he is proud of you. We're proud of you, and congratulations once again. For those of you listening, you can also download this session on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, or wherever you get all good podcasts. I want to remind all of you, if you want to continue the celebration with all of us at the Jewish Education Project, that our virtual benefit is on March 22nd. It's amazing to think that really a year ago, we went online. We're one of the first organizations to have a virtual benefit, and we're really just proud to be able to bring our message to all of you. Go online now, benefit.jewishedproject.org. You should register for that event. Tell all your friends about it. And while you're there, go to the donate page, make a contribution to the Jewish Education Project, not just because we want the funds to be able to do the work that we're doing, but because you also get a chance to honor some of the educators that have made an indelible impression on your life. And just go to the tribute wall. It's just amazing. It's inspiring. These 5 Young Pioneer Awards, they're just the beginning of those that we can celebrate in Jewish education. Remind you all again that any donation that's made between now and March 22nd will be matched by the Martine and Stanley Fleischman Matching Gift Fund. We're extremely, extremely privileged to be able to have Martine at our helm and leading by example and encouraging all of you to give so that we can continue the work that we're doing. It would be remiss of me again not to thank our wonderful partners at UJA Federation of New York, who really make all of this possible. And the work that they have done throughout this pandemic has truly, truly been amazing and heroic and inspiring. And because of them, because of the work we've been able to do together, I have no doubt we will come out of this pandemic even brighter and stronger perhaps than ever before. I really want to thank the people behind the scenes tonight. I'm going to miss some people, but I want to make sure I name some of them. Gabe and Nessa and Joe and Elise and Karen and Dina and Frank and Clarissa and Marco and the whole live team for helping to bring tonight's presentation there to all of us. I get the easy part about being able to talk to amazing people, and really, I just want to say once again, DiCo, Melissa, Dammara, Pamela, Avi, I'm going to sleep well tonight because you make me proud and you really inspire me, and really the future is bright because of people like yourself. So congratulations once again. Thanks to everyone listening tonight. We hope to see you on March 22nd, and let's keep up the good work, everybody. Stay safe, and if I don't see you all, Chag Sameach, have a happy Pesach as well.